This is very interesting. I think just to come up to my hypothesis, I think I have to read certain things and then find out what the literature says about the post-conflict countries in terms of economic growth and prosperity. Conflict occurs disproportionately in low-income countries, but investment must be tailored to countries' situation. That means, I think we have seen conflict and civil war in many countries, but if we see the number of countries that are suffering from conflict, we'll see more in low-income countries, least developed countries. I think that's number one. And number two, when we start doing post-conflict investment in any countries, I think, but it has to be tailored to the situation of the country. Like the situation in Afghanistan will be different from Nepal and will be different from East Timor and some of the sub-Saharan African countries like Sudan. So I think that's the message. The second, in the meantime, peace can collapse if the progress is not made. And there are a number of research papers that are saying that there is a chance of 39% for the relapse of the peace process in the first 5 years, 32% in the second year, and if the country is developing slightly relatively faster, then it goes down to 14%. This is one of the hypotheses. There could be many, but I think this is on an average, that's what the numbers are. The risks of conflict relapse will be high in low-income countries. Ethnic dominance, I'll tell you what is defined as ethnic dominance, and natural resources dependence country. I think these are the three major factors which can generate, initiate conflict, civil war, and also these are the same conditions where the peace process can be relapsed. The next one. Low-income stagnant countries. Risk exists in Nepal mainly because of very high unemployment in the country, but we have been very fortunate enough because our growth rate in labor force has been absorbed by the Middle East, Malaysia and India. I think Nepal has been very fortunate. Despite so many problems, we don't have the fiscal problem in the country so far. I think that's one of the things. Despite so many problems, civil war and conflict, our economic growth has not gone negative. So I think there are a number of things that I think we are faced with, but that's not the good one anyway. Ethnic dominance is defined as it can occur if the largest ethnic group is between 45 to 90% of the society. And I think this is very important. I think this will give us some positive message to Nepal. If one ethnic group is dominating the country, and which is defined as anywhere between 45% to 90% of the society, and minorities are sufficiently large to be worth exploiting. If you have Rautés, if you have Satar, these very small groups, and they cannot get their voice in the parliament. They cannot have a strong voice anywhere in the society. But if the minority is big, like as for example Limbuan, Khumbuan, and then Tarai, whatever we call it, if the minorities are quite big, then I think we could have some problem. But again, the number is 45% to 90%. But anyway, what I'm trying to say here is low income and stagnant, yes, I think Nepal will qualify for that. Ethnic dominance, if we go by this definition, low risk in Nepal. The reason is that we call it Baun Kshetri. Even if you combine Baun and Kshetris, they are only 33%. Now they have divided again. I think they have their own organization. Yeah. And then if we see only one group in Nepal of very high ethnic group, I think we don't find 45%. I think that's something positive for Nepal, if we go by this hypothesis. Natural resource dependence, we don't have that actually. If we see the contribution of natural resources in Nepal, agriculture is also considered as natural resources, forestry, livestock, and there are a number of other things, because even if we talk about the manufacturing sector, the inputs come from the agricultural sector. So if we count all those things, yes, we'll have a bigger share, but that's usually not considered. In the natural resources, what we consider is oil, natural gas, minerals, those kind of things we can see in Sudan and some of the sub-Saharan African countries. So is very, very important. But the most important one for the case of Nepal is inclusive, broad-based economic growth of the country. Because I am trying to eliminate some of those other things in the longer term. For the short term, I think these will be very, very important variables too. How to reinvigorate inclusive and broad-based economic growth? So that's the big question. Next one. Now, if we see the Nepal's development experience, I think we can see very surprising numbers in Nepal. In 1980s, where that is pre-reform period in Nepal, our economic growth rate was 4.8%. When I presented this one to politicians, one of the politicians who came to the power after 2000, and he started talking about saying that what Nepal has done in 1990s after economic liberalization, because the economic growth in 1980s was also 4.8%. So what's the big change? What's the big deal? But there is a fundamental difference that we have seen in 1980s and 1990s in terms of the structure of the growth in Nepal. 1990s, agriculture growth rate was 4.6%. This is just like what we have seen in India and China. And then we are saying that agriculture has not been growing very rapidly in Nepal. But there is one thing that we have to be very considered. Agriculture growth rate was mainly by area expansion, 37%, and we can avoid that better weather conditions. But the main factor was by cutting the forest in Nepal. So the land area expanded in the country, but there was no technological revolution, there was no great revolution in the country, but there was an increase in investment in agriculture because donors as well as the government, they were focusing agriculture sector in 1980s. Next one. And also non-agriculture sector growth was the result of the multiplier effect of the agriculture sector. You mean if you have a higher growth rate in agriculture sector, income coming from the agriculture sector, that will have some impact in the non-agriculture sector also. There was high government expenditure in construction area related to GDP. I am not talking about the nominal terms, but related to GDP. And expansion of government activities, as for example, gross capital formation during that period increased by 19% per annum from government sector compared to 16% in the private sector. Meaning that in 1990s, there was inward-looking policy, government was very active. Next one. So private sector's investment grows lower than public sector's investment. Economy is still inward-looking, and development expenditure increased by increasing budget deficit. If you see in Nepal in 1980s, budget deficit was really very high. It was close to 7.7%, and at one point of time it went up to 8.6%. So the government was spending lots of money, just like what we call public stimulus, but the private sector was very shy in terms of the overall investment in the country. Manufacturing sector share was stagnant at 5 to 6% of GDP. Private sector's investment was almost very shy, and despite 4.8% growth rate in Nepal, export GDP ratio declined significantly from about 7% to 5% of GDP. So next. Efficiency, I think in economic terms we call it total factor productivity. What is the impact of efficiency, government management, technology? That was almost negligible, non-existent, zero. Agricultural growth was not sustainable. The reason is that it was the result of the area expansion, not with anything else basically. In the 1990s, I think the growth rate was similar, 4.9%, but there was a major shift in the structure of the economy. Economic growth 4.9%, but agricultural sector's growth rate was 2.6%, non-agricultural sector's 6.5%. So it's the reverse in the overall structure of the economy. Why it happened? I think in 1990s we have seen many books about Nepal saying that Nepal's forest area will all go and Nepal will turn to desert if we continue to have cut down the forest the way that we are doing in 1970s and 80s. And there were not that many forests left. As for example, if you see the map of Nepal, Eastern Tarai actually doesn't have any land area for expansion because all the forests were cut down during 70s. structure of the economy changed very significantly from public sector led to private sector led in 1990. Adoption of market-oriented liberal economy in the country, reduction of tax rates very significantly. I think if we see the peak rate, customs peak rate, that was above 400% before 1990. But on an average today, it's only about 10% customs rate, tariff rate. Export orientation of the economy, I think, but unfortunately that was not sustained. The reason is that we were too much dependent on unsustainable export items like garment, carpet and number of other things, where we don't have our inputs to a large extent. Manufacturing sector's contribution increased very rapidly from 6% to 10%. Growth rate in real terms was more than 10%. Foreign direct investment increased very significantly. Export GDP ratio increased also very significantly from 5% to 13%. I think they were all very good news. Contribution of exports, I think that's what we have seen. If we identify the factors of growth in Nepal in 1990s, 25% contribution has come from the export sector in Nepal. Non-agricultural sector's growth rate was very high. Budget deficit actually declined very significantly because that was one of the conditions of the IMF and the World Bank to bring Nepal on the track of fiscal discipline. We worked very hard and the budget deficit declined. Poverty declined very significantly, but for different reasons, a number of other reasons. Agriculture productivity did increase, and also the agriculture growth rate was not very significant. But the worst thing that we saw in 1990s is income inequality increased very significantly in Nepal. So that was some of the worry of the economy. The regulatory mechanism very weak. Nepal's governance, as we know, is extremely weak, and then regulatory mechanism very, very weak, and private sector's economy was thriving, but government became very inefficient. And then 2001 to 2009, actually we had the Maoist problem starting from 1996, but 1996 to 2000 we didn't have that much of a problem, but the real problem started from 2001. So it is reflected here. If we see the performance between 2001 and 9, both sectors, investment declined in real terms, government sectors as well as private sector. Private sector for the reason that because we had so much of problem in the country. Government sector for the reason, two reasons. One is the number of people who joined the army increased from 48,000 to 96,000. So government's attention was drawn towards the security of the country. So most of the money that we increased as a revenue were spent on the security. That's number one. And number two, at one point of time, I think none of the government officers were able to go outside the district headquarters to do the development activity. I think during 2003, 4, 5 until 6. So government was not able to spend a lot of money in capital formation. Insecurity was the major problem, and declining export. Export also started declining because of economic condition of Nepal and the termination of multi-fiber agreement. We used to get quota from the United States. So I think there were a number of things. Next one. Declining manufacturing output, the share which increased to above 10% started declining again. Agriculture slightly better, but how did it got better? The reason is that there was a proliferation of roads in Nepal actually, even including in the rural area. The reason is that if we go to any countryside in Nepal, any rural areas in Nepal, number one demand of the people in that area is have the road construction in those areas and connect them to the highway. I think that has really done well in the country. So that created a market for high value crops in Nepal. As for example, tea, coffee, season vegetable, off-season vegetables, spices like cardamom and number of those things. So I think these what we call high yield varieties in Nepal or high value crops in Nepal are growing at a rate of 6 to 7% in Nepal, despite all these problems. But we are suffering from the productivity growth in the cereal sector. End of farm conflict has started showing some positive signals, but what the hypothesis For countries like Nepal, if we see countries, any countries in the world in the post-conflict situation, they don't reduce expenditure in the military. The reason is that, exactly, for the first 5 years, there is a possibility of relapse after peace. Next 5 years, slightly declining, but there is a chance. So we can see the psychology of the people working in the government. They don't want to reduce the expenditure going to the security sector, at least for a while, and then without being confident that our peace process will be significant and substantial. Again, for the same reason, and private investors will be shy. So that's the reason why we have seen low government investment as well as low private sector investment in the country. There are additional problems. I think labor rigidity in unions, that the problem has really increased. Infrastructure problem, especially electricity problem, has worsened the situation in the country. But we also have the political problem. Now, if we have to do the economic growth and development in the country, what are some of the things that we can do? If you see some of the examples of the high growth countries, and I'm also giving some examples from big countries as well as small countries, there are two things that is very clear. One is the export GDP ratio has to be very high, meaning that one has to be able to compete in the market. China, export GDP ratio is 37%, this is slightly dated data, but the main exports are coming from the manufacturing sector. India, 21%, but the main contribution is from the service sector, starting from IT, basically. There are differences in different countries, but one fundamental commonality what we have seen is export has to be very high in these countries. If we see Vietnam, very surprising. Now, 70% of GDP is exported. Export GDP ratio is very, very high. Bhutan, electricity export, 27% of GDP. Laos, similarly, electricity export to Thailand, 27% of GDP. But Nepal, only 15%, but that is also including tourism sector, services sector in the country. So the first thing is that if you see the high growth countries, export GDP ratio of Nepal is very low compared to high growth countries. And the second is gross capital formation as a percentage of GDP, meaning that investment. So as I told you before, the government investment as well as the private sector investment has gone down. Look at the Nepal situation. Only 21% of GDP is invested compared to 41% in China, 33% in India, 35% in Vietnam, 60% in Bhutan, and 45% in Laos. So I think these are the two common things probably we need to see for the future. Next one. High growth countries, I have already told you about that. Next one. Capital is also the key, that we can go next one. In the initial stage, I think I was reading some of the papers written about China in 1990s and even today. Slightly better in China these days, but almost all the contribution, external contribution in China is coming from the capital. And labor is very important, but in developing countries we don't give that much of emphasis because labor is always in surplus in this country. The contribution of capital to China's growth in 1990s was 80%. The contribution of labor was 20%. And contribution of technology, none, basically. 2000, I think they have started improving technology and efficiency, but capital is very, very key in the initial stage of the development. Next one. Now, what can be done about Nepal? I think I will say rapid expansion of irrigated agricultural land and promotion and commercialization of high-value crops could increase agricultural growth rate. The reason I am saying is that if you see irrigation facilities in Nepal, if you see the economic survey, you can see lots of good news. But if you do the real survey in Nepal, only 25% of Nepal's cultivated land is under year-round irrigation. I think that's the biggest challenge. If we see the difference between the productivity in India and Nepal, then 65% of that difference is explained by water, only water, and the rest, about 35% by other things. So, number one and those kind of things. Even in India, if we see smaller towns, meaning towns with more than 100,000 population, I think we can see hundreds of those within 50 kilometers of the borders from Nepal. So there is enormous opportunity to sell those high value crops in India. Now inequality is increasing. I will come to that one later on. But what I would like to say, I will give you some example. How we can reduce the inequality? There are a number of things probably that we can do. Agriculture is one of the things that can help in reducing the inequality. But there is a new theory of regional development developed. That means that, like as for example in Karnali, if we just make a road, if we just help them in education, the Karnali zone will not develop at all. What this new theory suggests is that what is the major competitive advantage of the Karnali zone, as for example? Mugu, that's the least developed district of Nepal. One single thing, that's Rara Lake, which is much more beautiful, that's what I think, much more beautiful than Phewa Lake. That itself can generate so much of income to the people to Mugu that they don't have to do anything. They don't have to do the agriculture actually. So the whole theory of regional competitive advantage is that whatever is available, that should be the focus of the development. Dolpa, one of the poorest region in the world, in the country, it has so much of natural beauty and tourist spot that it should not be poor at all. But anyway, I will come to that point later on. Next one, please. So what are some of the new areas of growth in Nepal? Agriculture, I just told you about, which is about 1/3 of GDP. Hydropower development. Agriculture, I told you only two things: irrigation and high value crops. And hydropower development, although we have been talking about hydropower development for the last 30 years, 40 years, the recent study done by Water Resource Ministry, or now the Ministry of Energy, says that we have a capacity of more than 200,000 megawatt in the country. It's not 83,000. It's more than 200,000. So we are so rich in hydropower resources, but the total generation today, even in the peak time, is slightly more than 600 megawatt. And there are some problems of hydropower, but very recently, I think Nepal has done some progress in increasing the PPA rate. That is a very good sign. But there are still one problem. I will come to that problem later on. This is called ILO 169, and then I will come to that one very later. Meaning that local people are giving disturbance in development of the hydropower. But the reason and then what we are trying to write in the new constitution, I will give you in a minute. Revenue generation from hydropower, it all depends on what kind of analysis we do. If we can generate about 10,000 megawatt, it can bring Nepal up to 250 billion rupees per annum as a revenue. Because revenue in hydroelectricity can be generated from number of things. One is tax. Number two is if the project is cheaper, like the Karnali one, the investors are ready to give almost 30% as the free energy for the country, and then we have royalty. So it all depends on the different projects and programs in the country, but it can generate revenue for New Nepal. Nepal has a strong, very natural competitive advantage in the tourism. I don't think I have to explain this one, because tourism has so much potential in the country. And then if we see the growth rate of tourism in Nepal compared to the least developed countries, the tourism growth rate has been about 11% per annum for the whole 50 countries. But Nepal's growth rate has been off and on, but low compared to what we have seen in least developed countries. Next one. Potential to grow high value crops, as I told you before. Irrigation also, I think I explained that one already. Next one. Trade and investment growth. I think in the manufacturing sector, we don't have competitive advantage in the country. So, what can be done? Although the government has identified about 19 different products for investment and exports, but my feeling is that I have identified some of those the smaller layers. But if we really would like to have some kind of manufacturing growth in Nepal, my suggestion will be to establish a special economic zone in Inner Tarai from east to west, because we are not getting any revenue, we are not getting any benefit anyway from today, from most of the manufacturing sector. So why don't we have like a free investment zone from Mechi to Mahakali, especially in Inner Tarai, where the transportation will be much easier and the living condition will be much better to the investor in the country. There is another reason for this advice, but today, whatever we see in terms of the overall trade of the Asia-Pacific region, 30% of the trade in Asia-Pacific region is not in the final product, but in parts and components, because the world is flat these days. Anything that is made in Nepal could become the component for the final product in India or Tibet or even China or even to other countries, because I think these days manufacturing sector has really become global, and the division of labor has really become very global. And then anything that we see made in Japan these days, most of the things, 95% of the parts and components are not made in Japan. Most of them, they are made in Southeast Asian countries. So I think that's how the manufacturing sector works these days in the world. Next one. And we can also take the advantage of India and China, because they are growing so rapidly. Utilization of India's concession and market, because we have trade agreement with India. Anything that is produced in Nepal can go duty-free, quota-free. This has certain conditions, but in general, I think we can take the advantage of that. We can take the advantage of division of labor, as I told you before, increasing the Tibet connection. Tibet is, we see some of the things that are importing. Tibet is importing from the mainland China. We can probably export in relatively cheaper price from Nepal, because the transportation cost will be much lower. So that's where probably we need the diplomacy to improve it. Utilization of use everything but arms and GST facilities in US. The GST facilities, we are only utilizing 9% of the total facilities available to Nepal. And there is tremendous potential to increase the export from Nepal to US under GST scheme. What is a GST? Generalized system of preferences. That's basically duty-free, quota-free type. The next one. Yeah. As I told you before, I think one of the things that we can do to reduce inequality is to focus on the competitive advantage of those regions. I am giving some examples. Where I have been to. Rara Lake of Google, right? I just told you before, that's probably one of the nicest spot in Nepal for tourism. Vegetable seeds in Rukum. I think Rukum is one of the poorest districts in Nepal. But the vegetable seed produced in Rukum used to go to Bangladesh and India and different parts of Nepal. But over the last 10 years, I think it has really eroded. But if we specialize on only one thing, the vegetable seeds in Rukum, the economic structure of Rukum can change a lot. Khaptar, I think it's in an area where we have 4 districts, adjoining districts, Badal, Kangra, Assam and Jodi. Khaptar is such a nice place. I don't know whether you have been to those places. Probably that's one of the nicest park in Nepal. And then you can see so many vegetables. You can have skiing, ice skating, sports. There are so many things we can develop in Khaptar. That's after Rara. I'll say that if there is anything that is so much beautiful, I think Khaptar is one of those. Dolpa, as I told you before, I think there are so many things that we can develop in Dolpa, and then Dolpa should not be poor just like what they are today. So, special economic zone, agriculture trading, networking hub in Tarai, I think these are some of the things that we can do, probably increasing the economic growth of those areas and also reducing the income inequality. Today, if we see the revenue generated from different districts of Nepal, 85% of the revenue, total revenue comes from 7 districts, which is very pathetic, and then that's one of the constraints for federalism in Nepal, because out of 75 countries, most of the districts and the provinces, would-be provinces, they have to depend on the central. And then we used to have long discussions because I was working in the Constitutional Assembly, especially coming from Tarai. Tarai is so rich, we have so high per capita income, and all the customs offices are in Tarai. Then why don't we get some revenue? Why don't we get authority to collect the revenue? So I think we had so much of discussion with the Constitutional Assembly members, but finally they agreed what is the situation. And I used to give them one example. Biratnagar, if you close the Biratnagar customs, then people will go from Bhairava, people will go from Japa. I think there are many things and that can be done by the private sector. So finally, I think the committee that I was working with, the economic rights, public revenue and natural resources, all the problems were solved. But I'll warn you one thing, that that chapter, and not only that chapter, it's highly dependent on the central, even after we'll have the federalism. The reason is that uneven distribution of resources. But resources can be developed only when we can develop and then exploit the competitive advantage of different places. Conclusion, political inclusion tackled by the Constitution, I think that's the responsibility of the politicians. I think they are trying to do that. Now we have inclusive parliament, inclusive Constitutional Assembly, and then we have the federalism. So that probably can be tackled. There is one problem, I think I did mention that one in the beginning, natural resources. That has been tackled in the proposed Constitution. This has been already passed by 601 Constitutional Assembly members. How do we provide the rights of the irrigation for agriculture? Third is livestock, and the fourth one is hydro. And the second is investment rights of local people. It has been clearly written in the proposed Constitution that the local people will have the right to invest in the natural resources development of the region. But the percentage has not been identified in the Constitution. The reason is that the Constitution will not provide the numbers, because sometimes it could be 2%, sometimes it could be 5%. It all depends on the situation and the type of natural resources. So that has been guaranteed. And number three is benefits of development of natural resources has been guaranteed to the local people. How do you get the benefits out of natural resources? If the hydropower is developed in certain region, the royalties, if you see Brazil, if you see Argentina, if you see other countries, then about 80% of the royalty goes to the people living in those areas, staying in those areas. I think we have given enough examples, and also I think that while writing the Constitution, you have to explain in detail why you wrote something like that in the main clause. And then we have to keep in writing details of the experience of other countries, and that becomes the explanatory note to the Constitution. And the court, if there is any problem in the court, they will have the right to go and look into those interpretations that have been given in the Constitution or the draft of the Constitution. Once we tackle the political problem and then the natural resource problem, if you go on my first slide, the last one that is remained is the only problem is of inclusive economic development. It takes time but can be tackled. Nepal has an enormous prospect for the economic development in the country. I think I would like to start here.
हामी सबै नेपालको बुद्धिजीवीहरू नेपाललाई चाहिने ब्रेनहरू विदेशमा छौँ र हामी गर्व गर्छौँ हामी विदेशमा छौँ हामी जिल्ला सडकमा जिल्ला गाडी कुदेर बस्छौँ तर यसो नेपालमा फर्केर हेर्नुहोस् नेपालको गाउँघरमा बालबच्चाहरूलाई जाडो महिनामा एउटा लाउने लुगा पनि छैन लाउने चप्पल पनि छैन त्यसलाई देखेर हाम्रो मन कति हुन्छ त्यो म भन्न सक्दिनँ तर मेरो मन साह्रै हुन्छ। अर्को कुरा हामी धेरै पेपरहरू प्रेजेन्टेसन गर्छौँ धेरै फोरम्सहरू चलाउँछौँ यसरी आफ्ना यो कम्प्लिट यो फोरममा पनि धेरै ब्रेन्सहरू हुनुहुन्छ। हामी म एउटा मान्छे गर्छौँ तपाईँ सबै ताली बजाउनुहुन्छ आहा कति राम्रो मान्छे भन्नुहुन्छ भन्नुहुन्छ सुन्नुहुन्छ भने हाम्रो यो पनि एउटा इन्भेस्टमेन्ट हो। तपाईँहरू कहाँबाट आउनुभएको छ, यहाँ बस्नुभएको छ, कति पैसा खर्च गरेर यस्तो बाइकहरू बस्नुभएको छ, समय बिताइरहेको भएको छ। आजको यो पर्व सकिएपछि ओहो यो राम्रो रहेछ ल केही गरौँ न त भन्ने भावनाले केही भन्नुहुन्छ भन्ने म आशा राख्छु। किनभने म आफ्नो इन्ट्रेस्टलाई जहिले पनि 3 भागमा विभाजित गरिरहेको हुन्छु। यदि कुनै फोरममा नेपाल यस्तो देश छ, नेपालमा यस्तो यस्तो समस्याहरू छ भन्ने किसिमको इन्फर्मेसन आउँछ भने म त्यसलाई मेरो इन्ट्रेस्टको क्याटेगोरी नम्बर 3 मा राख्छु। किनभने आफ्नो देशको लागि इन्फर्मेसन पाउन राम्रो कुरा हो। यदि त्यो इन्फर्मेसनमा राखेर ठिकै छ नेपालमा यस्तो समस्या रहेछ, यस्तो यस्तो कुराहरू गर्न सकिन्छ भनेर योजनाहरूको बारेमा कुनै कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुत हुन्छ भने म त्यो मेरो इन्ट्रेस्टको क्याटेगोरी नम्बर 2 मा राख्छु। किनभने गर्न सकिने कुराहरूको बारेमा हामीलाई जानकारी भयो। तर ल यो कार्यक्रम गर्न सकिँदो रहेछ ल गरौँ भन्नुहुन्छ भने त्यो मेरो इन्ट्रेस्टको क्याटेगोरीको रूपमा लिनुहुन्छ। र म त्यही इन्ट्रेस्टको साथ म यहाँ केही मेरो योजनाहरू सपनाहरू यहाँ राख्दैछु र गर्न सकिने कुराहरू र त्यसलाई राखेर तपाईँलाई पनि एकदम इन्ट्रेस्ट आयो र गर्न सकिन्छ र ल गरौँ भनेर यहाँ कोठाबाट निक्लिनुहुन्छ भने त्यो मलाई लाग्छ मेरो आजको यो समय होइन तपाईँको समय चाहिँ सार्थक हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ। यही भन्दै फर्स्ट अफ अल अघि नेपालको बारेमा इकोनोमिक कन्डिसनको बारेमा डेभलपमेन्ट अपर्च्युनिटीको बारेमा राजुज्यूले धेरै नै भनिसक्नु भएको छ। तर पनि हामीलाई थाहा छ नेपाल कृषि प्रधान देश हो। यसको मेन इकोनोमी हाम्रो रुरल इकोनोमी हो र 80% रुरल पपुलेसन एग्रिकल्चरमा हामी इन्गेज छौँ। र नेपाल हामी यस्तो देश हो, हामीमा धेरै रिसोर्सेसहरू छ र पनि हामी संसारको गरिब राष्ट्रमध्येको एउटा पर्छौँ। किन पर्छौँ भन्दाखेरि हामी कृषि प्रधान देश हौँ भन्छौँ, तर नेपालको गाउँघरमा 9 महिना मान्छेहरू भुक्तारीमा परिरहेको छ होइन। हाम्रो 80% मोर देन 80% नेपालीहरू कृषि रुरल फिल्डमा हुनुहुन्छ, कृषक हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँहरूकै घरमा खाद्यान्न हुँदैन। किन भइरहेको छैन भन्दाखेरि फर्स्ट अफ अल त हामी आफ्नो खुट्टामा उभिन सिकिरहेका छैनौँ। हाम्रो देश नै फरेन डोनेसनले चलिरहेको छ र धेरै फरेन एडहरू एग्रिकल्चर प्रोडक्टिभिटीमा खर्च भइरहेको छ। कसरी नेपालको रिसोर्सेसहरूलाई म्यानेजमेन्ट गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने विषयमा फरेन डोनेसन नै खर्च भइरहेको छ। यो इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर र इम्प्लोइमेन्ट र इन्कम जेनेरेटिङ अपर्च्युनिटीमा पनि फरेन डोनेसन नै खर्च भइरहेको छ। र नेपालमा सयौँ हजारौँ एनजिओज र आइएनजिओजहरूले रुरल हेल्थ इकोनोमी धेरै कुरामा लगानी गरिरहेको छ। तर पनि मैले अघि भन्छु हामी धेरै नै गरिब छौँ। यो गरिब हुनको कारण के हुन्छ? सब डेटाहरू मैले चाहिँ युएसएआइडीबाट 1.5 वर्ष अगाडि लिएको थिएँ कि यो हाम्रो गरिबको सिम्बल्सहरू हो कि हाम्रो पर क्यापिटा इन्कम नियरली $500 छ। 1/3 अफ हामी नेपालीहरू पोभर्टी लाइन बिलो छौँ। 55% चाहिँ $1 अर 1.25 सेन्टमा हामी त्योभन्दा तल बाँचिरहेका छौँ। भने एजुकेसन र हेल्थ हेर्नु भने एसियामा हामी सबभन्दा तल छौँ। अहिले पनि हेरौँ भुटानभन्दा तल हाम्रो जिडिपीहरू छ भन्ने कुरा हामीले जिडिपीबाट हेरिसकेको छौँ। र 85% अफ युथ 10 इयर्स स्कुलमा पनि कम्प्लिट नगरेका छन् भने 46% अनइम्प्लोइड छ। यो युएसएआइडीको रिपोर्ट अनुसार। अनि किन त्यस्तो भइरहेको छ? हाम्रो देश किन गरिब छ, किन अशिक्षित छौँ हामीमा किन? यो गाउँमा वर्षेनी झाडा पखालाबाट 200-250 मान्छे मरिरहेको छ। अर्को वर्ष पनि त्यही ठाउँमा त्यति नै मान्छेहरू मरिरहेको हुन्छ। हामीसँग त्यसलाई कसरी इम्प्रुभ गर्ने त्यो सेफ्टी नेट प्रोग्राम छैन। कोसिरेजले पनि धनजनको क्षति गरिरहेको छ। त्यसलाई पर्मानेन्टली हामी कसरी सोल्भ गर्ने सेफ्टी नेट प्रोग्रामसँग वेल इस्टाब्लिस प्रोग्रामसँग छैन, अथवा भए पनि इम्प्लिमेन्टेसन भइरहेको छैन। अरू कुरा ल्याक अफ सस्टेनेबिलिटी अफ रुरल डेभलपमेन्ट प्रोजेक्ट, पार्टिसिपेसन। र यो कुरा चाहिँ आजको मेरो टकको दिन फोकस चाहिँ हुन्छ। र मैले अघि भनिसकेँ हामी डिपेन्डेन्ट छौँ, हामी आफ्नो खुट्टामा उभिन सकेका छैनौँ। किन भन्दाखेरि कुनै पनि प्रोग्राम हुनको लागि त्यहाँ पिपुल्सको पार्टिसिपेसन जबसम्म हुँदैन तबसम्म कुनै पनि प्रोग्राम सस्टेन हुँदैन। एउटा सानो इक्जाम्पल म तपाईँहरूलाई के दिन्छु भन्दा हाम्रो देशमा नेपालभन्दा धेरै हुन्छ, मान्छेलाई मतलबै छैन। तपाईँको अगाडिको सडकमा सबै स्ट्रिट लाइटहरू बन्द आह्वानकर्ताले फुटाइदिन्छ, तपाईँलाई केही पनि मतलब छैन। किनभने सडक तपाईँको गोलीको पैसाबाट बनेको होइन, जापान सरकारले बनाइदिएको, युरोपले बनाइदिएको। टिमहरू तपाईँको गोलीको पैसाबाट बनेको होइन, त्यो सोचेछ हाम्रो। एउटा टिम फटाएन अर्को देशले बनाइदिइहाल्छ। तर त्यो ढुङ्गा आएर तपाईँको घरको एउटा च्याखाने हिसाबको ग्लास फुटोस् त कतिखेर निक्लिनुहुन्छ तपाईँ, कसले फुटायो मेरो ग्लासबाट? किन भन्दाखेरि त्यो सिसाको ग्लासमा तपाईँको पैसा परेको छ। अनि जबसम्म आफ्नोपन आउँदैन तबसम्म कहिले पनि विकास हुँदैन। र त्यही आफ्नोपन कुनै पनि प्रोजेक्ट यहाँ मैले अघि भने हजारौँ आइएनजिओज एनजिओजहरूले ठुल्ठुलो प्रोजेक्ट गर्नु सक्छ। के भन्दै मेरो सौभाग्य पनि हो नेपाली बाबाहरू कार्यक्रममा आउनुभएको छ। म पनि मेरो तर्फबाट स्वागत। र मैले त्यही भनेको जबसम्म पिपुल्स पार्टिसिपेसन कुनै पनि प्रोग्राममा हुँदैन त्यो प्रोग्राम कहिले पनि सस्टेन हुँदैन। हामीले धेरै नेपालमा देखिसकेको छौँ, एउटा फरेन अर्गनाइजेसनले कुनै एउटा स्कुल बनाइदिन्छ, 5 इयर्सको त्योसँग त्यो स्कुलको लागि बजेट हुन्छ, 5 वर्षसम्म स्कुल राम्रो हुन्छ। जब त्यो फरेन डोनर्सको त्यो इन्भेस्टमेन्ट त्यो स्कुलबाट सकिन्छ, त्यो स्कुल अबको 2 वर्षमा चाहिँ बाख्राको होइन बाख्राहरू चलाउने ठाउँहरू हुन्छ। किनभने कसरी त्यहाँ गाउँको मान्छेहरूलाई त्यो स्कुललाई कसरी सस्टेन गराउने भन्ने कुराको जबसम्म त्यहाँ प्रोजेक्ट तिनीहरूलाई त्यो रूपमा हामीले डेभलप गराउन सक्दैनौँ, सस्टेन हुँदैन। त्यही भएर नेपालमा अरबौँ खरबौँ रुपियाँ फरेन लगानीमा आइसकेको छ। सस्टेन नभएको कारण त्यही हो र हाम्रो देश अहिले पनि पछाडि परेको कारण त्यही हो। र टोटली मेन्सन भएले नै अघि भनिसकेको छ, देशले फरेन मात्र गइरहेको छ। त्यसैले हाम्रो देशमा हामीले रुरल डेभलपमेन्ट कसरी गर्छौँ यो कुरा मेरो एकचोटि रिड ग्लोबलको मान्छेहरूसँग कुरा गर्दाखेरि उहाँले हामीले तिम्रो देशमा 40-50वटा लाइब्रेरी बनाइसक्यौँ भन्नुभयो। अनि मैले के भने भन्दाखेरि म पनि एउटा लोवर क्लास फ्यामिलीबाट बुझेको हो। मैले पनि स्कुलमा जाँदाखेरि कति वर्षसम्म चप्पलै नलागेर गएको हो। मलाई पनि गोजीमा चिउरा हालेर त्यही चिउरा लिएर लाउँछु थियो। र जबसम्म एटलिस्ट मेरो गोजीमा चिउरा थियो, गाउँघरको बच्चाको गोजीमा चिउरा पनि हुँदैन भने जबसम्म उसले बिहान खाएर बेलुका के खाउँ भन्ने समस्या हुन्छ, तिमीले जतिसुकै महँगो किताब हेऱ्यो भने उसलाई किताबतिर ध्यानै हुँदैन भने फर्स्ट हामीले के हो उसले खानु पाउनुपर्छ। फुड फर्स्ट प्रायोरिटी हुन्छ, त्यसपछि मात्र उसले पढाइतिर ध्यान हुन्छ। भोको पेटले विद्वान हुँदैन भन्ने मान्यतामा म छु। 1-2जना एक्सेप्सनमा होला, तर सबैजना हुँदैन। हामीले एभरेज मान्छेलाई सोच्नुपर्छ भने जबसम्म हामीले रुरलको इकोनोमी डेभलप गर्दैनौँ, इकोनोमी इन द सेन्स कि हाम्रो रुरल एरियामा चाहिँ ठुल्ठुलो फ्याक्ट्री हुनुपर्छ भनेको छैन। रुरल इकोनोमीको मतलब मान्छे खाना पाउनु पऱ्यो, जाडोमा 1 सरो लुगा लगाउनु पऱ्यो, स्कुल जानको लागि खाना चप्पल हुनु पऱ्यो। त्यसलाई हामीले बेसलाइन बनाउँ। र जबसम्म त्यो डेभलप हुँदैन तबसम्म हामीले ठुल्ठुलो स्कुल र कलेजको कुरा ल्याउँदाखेरि त्यो त्यति सार्थक र सफल हुँदैन। त्यसैले हामीले यस्तो किसिमको प्रोजेक्ट डेभलप गर्नुपर्छ जसले रुरल हेल्थ, एजुकेसन र इकोनोमिक डेभलपमेन्टलाई समग्र रूपमा अगाडि बढाउन सकोस् र त्यो सस्टेनेबल होस्। त्यही भएर किनभने यो इन्टर रिलेटेड भएकोले मैले मेरो प्रोजेक्टको नाम प्रायोरिटी के हुन्छ भन्दा सस्टेनेबिलिटी। किन मैले त्यो धेरै देखिसकेको छु, धेरै पढिसकेको छु। सस्टेनेबिलिटी जबसम्म सस्टेन हुँदैन, जबसम्म त्यो हामी सबै नेपाली मिलेर मैले यहाँको अर्गनाइजेसनलाई भन्ने कुरा पनि त्यही हो कि म एउटा नेपालीले मैले एउटा स्कुलको 2टा बालबालिकालाई म स्कलरसिप दिने मसँग क्षमता छ, तर त्यसले चेन्ज ल्याउँदैन। हामी समाज हामीलाई अर्गनाइजेसन किन चाहिन्छ भन्दा अर्गनाइजेसनमा 100जना मान्छे भयो भने 1जनाले 2टा बालबालिकालाई स्कलरसिप दिन सकिन्छ भने 100जनाले 200 बालबालिकालाई स्कलरसिप दिन सकिन्छ। 200 त्यसले चाहिँ चेन्ज ल्याउँछ। त्यसैले हामीलाई यस्तो किसिमको प्रोजेक्ट चाहियो जुन चाहिँ need a community project not depending solely on foreign aid but creates local market for fighting poverty. हैन, हामीले हाम्रै मार्केट डेभलप गर्नु पर्यो। हामीलाई लुगा चाहियो, खानेकुरा चाहियो भने त्यो फरेन एड खोजेर हाम्रै गाउँमा, हाम्रै अगाडिको खेतमा बारेमा उब्जाउन सिक्नु पर्यो र आफ्नो मार्केट डेभलप गर्न सक्यो भने मात्र त्यो सस्टेन हुन्छ भन्ने मान्यता हो। अनि त्यसमा रिटले के गर्छ त, यो प्रोजेक्ट हामीले जुन कन्सेप्ट डेभलप गरिरहेको छौँ त्यो प्रोजेक्टले के गर्छ भन्दाखेरि वर्क्स विथ पुअर रुरल फार्म फ्यामिलिज टु इन्क्रिज देयर एग्रिकल्चरल प्रोडक्टिभिटी, providing them with the basics of food security, income generation and integration with market. यो भनेको मतलब के हो भन्दाखेरि फुड प्रोडक्टिभिटीको लागि नेपालमा सयौं अर्गनाइजेसनहरू छ र त्यो फुड प्रोडक्टिभिटी गर्न सिकाइदियो। कुनै पनि प्रोजेक्ट चाहिँ साइक्लिक अर्डरमा हुनुपर्छ, जहाँबाट स्टार्ट भयो डेभलप गरेर फेरि स्टार्टिङ गरेर जबसम्म साइक्लिक अर्डरमा कुनै पनि प्रोजेक्ट चल्दैन त्यसको एन्ड हुन्छ। त्यो एन्डलाई हामीले फेरि स्टार्टिङसँग जोड्नुपर्छ। मतलब हामीले गाउँघरमा हेल्थ केयर इन्टरनेसनल भन्नेले $10 एउटा परिवारलाई चाहिँ खानेकुरा उब्जाउ गर्न सिकाइदिन्छ, अलिकति बिउ दिन्छ। उसले खानेकुरा उब्जाउ गर्यो 10 बार होइन, उनीहरूलाई केही आइडिया छैन भने सिजनमा खानेकुरा टन्न उब्जाउ हुन्छ। फर इक्जाम्पल हामी टमाटरको इक्जाम्पल लिउँ, तराईमा टमाटर सिजनमा तपाईँको 50 पैसा किलोमा पनि बिक्दैन, अफ सिजनमा 50-60 रुपियाँ किलोमा पनि त्यो टमाटर पाइन्छ। अब हामी युएसको एउटा ग्रोसरी सपमा जाउँ त 12 महिनादेखि जुन खानेकुराहरू देख्छौँ, किन भन्दाखेरि यहाँको मान्छेले जानिसकेको छ कसरी सिजनमा उब्जेको खानेकुरालाई अफ सिजनमा कसरी युज गर्ने भन्ने कुरा जानिसकेको छ। त्यस कारणले त्यो कुरा हामीले सिकाउन सक्यौँ। त्यो कुरा सिकाउने एउटा एम हो यो प्रोजेक्टको। र प्रोडक्टिभिटी बढाउँ, धेरै खानेकुरा उब्जाउँ, खानेकुरा नभएर एग्रिकल्चर प्रोडक्टिभिटी पनि हुन्छ। त्यसलाई कसरी प्रिजर्भ गर्ने र कसरी त्यसलाई मार्केटमा लगेर उनीहरूको इकोनोमिक डेभलपमेन्ट गराउने र यसको रिट मोडलको भिजन के छ भन्दाखेरि सस्टेनेबल डेभलपमेन्ट अफ रुरल इकोनोमी, हेल्थ एन्ड एजुकेसन अफ पुअर रुरल कम्युनिटी यो भिजन हो। यसको लागि मिसन के काम गर्न सकिन्छ भन्दाखेरि इस्टाब्लिस फुड कलेक्सन एन्ड स्मल स्केल प्रोसेसिङ युनिट इन इच भिलेज। के गरौँ हामी भन्दाखेरि एउटा गाउँमा एउटा फुड कलेक्सन सेन्टर खोलौँ। एउटा सिम्पल इक्जाम्पल, त्यसले के गर्ने भन्दाखेरि त्यो गाउँ फुड कलेक्सन सेन्टर खोलिसकेपछि वर्क विथ भिलेजर टु प्रोड्युस मोर फुड फर प्रोसेसिङ, प्रिजर्भेसन एन्ड मार्केटिङ। त्यो फुड सेन्टर युनिटले के गर्छ, प्रत्येक गाउँको प्रत्येक घरमा गएर मान्छेहरूलाई कसरी प्रोडक्टिभिटी बढाउने बारेमा उनीहरूसँग इन्टरेक्सन गरेर हामी उनीहरूलाई फुड प्रोडक्टिभिटी बेसी बनाउनेमा इन्करेज गराउँ, ट्रेन गराउँ। गरिसकेपछि improve economic status to reduce the problem of literacy and other public health problems. त्यसलाई म पछि अलिक डिटेलमा जान्छु यो मोडलमा। What is the primary goal of this project भन्दा strengthening rural communities by sustainable development of rural economy, health and education. यो कुरा पनि यसको यो एक्सप्लेन गर्नुपर्छ, यो अलिकति गोलको कुरा हो। भने लङ टर्म गोल के हो भन्दाखेरि 1 village 1 food collection and processing unit, 1 village 1 community school। कसरी सम्भव हुन्छ यो? त्यो सम्भव हुनको लागि के योजना छ, वाट इज द प्लान भन्ने कुरा छ। यो सिम्पल मैले आउटलाइन गरेको प्लानलाई, किनभने अहिले त्यो सबै कुरा चाहिँ भर्बल कुरा हो, यो कुरालाई मलाई राम्रो एक्सप्लेन गर्नुपर्छ। के गर्ने प्रोजेक्टको कसरी स्टार्ट गर्छौँ भन्दा हामी एउटा भिलेज छान्छौँ। त्यो भिलेज तपाईँको सिटी सेन्टर भनेको कुनै एउटा सहरको नजिक हुन्छ। कारण के हो भन्दाखेरि हामीलाई मार्केट चाहिन्छ, मार्केट भनेको सहर हो। अहिले नेपालको लागि मार्केट भनेको काठमाडौँ मात्र भइरहेको छ, अनि काठमाडौँ इज नट ओन्ली नेपाल। हामीले पूर्व मेचीदेखि पश्चिम महाकालीसम्म मार्केट हामीले बढाउनुपर्छ र त्यो लोकल मार्केट हुन्छ, हामी नेपालको लागि मार्केट बनाउनुपर्छ। काठमाडौँको नजिक एउटा भिलेजलाई एउटा नमुना भिलेजको रूपमा लिउँ। त्यो नमुना भिलेजमा हामी के गरौँ भन्दाखेरि फुड कलेक्सन एन्ड प्रोसेसिङ युनिट खोल्नु। यो भाष कुरा हो। फुड कलेक्सन एन्ड प्रोसेसिङ युनिटमा त्यो गाउँघरमा उब्जाएको मान्छेहरूको खानेकुराहरू के छ त्यसलाई कलेक्सन गर्ने, त्यसलाई मार्केटिङ गराइदिने अथवा त्यसलाई प्रोसेस गरेर कसरी हुन्छ सिजनमा उब्जाउ गरेको खानेकुरालाई अफ सिजनमा उनीहरूलाई कसरी खुवाउन सकिन्छ त्यो स्किल डेभलप गराउने उनीहरूलाई भने। र त्यो भिलेज वानले अरू 4वटा भिलेजसँग कम्युनिकेट गर्छ, यो टेक्निकल कुरा हो भने। त्यो भिलेजमा सक्सेस भयो भने सिटी सेन्टरको अरू वरिपरिको 4वटा भिलेज हामी टार्गेट गर्छौँ यही हिसाबमा। जसले गर्दाखेरि हामीसँग 25 भिलेजेसहरू एउटा सिटी सेन्टरको वरिपरिको 25 भिलेजेसहरू हामी टार्गेट गर्न सक्छौँ प्रोजेक्टको लागि भने। अब कसरी वाट इज द वर्किङ स्ट्राटेजी भन्दा सबभन्दा फर्स्ट स्ट्राटेजी हो फुड प्रोडक्सन स्ट्राटेजी। त्यसको लागि हामीले भिलेजर्सलाई एग्रिकल्चर ट्रेनिङ दिने, स्टार्टअप सप्लाई हुँदाखेरि एउटा गाउँको मान्छेलाई उसँग काम गर्ने उयो छ भनौँ न क्षमता छ, तर उसँग सप्लाई छैन, बिउ किन्ने पैसा छैन, बारी किन्ने कोरालो छैन, हलो छैन, गोरु छैन, इत्यादि इत्यादि कुराहरू। त्यसलाई हामीले चाहिँ स्टार्टअप सप्लाइज दिएर त्यसपछि जुन होमलाई फुड प्रोडक्सनलाई पनि उनीहरूलाई हामीले चाहिँ इम्प्रुभ गराउनुपर्छ। उदाहरणको लागि मैले नेपालमा चाहिँ बिटेक फुड टेक्नोलोजीमा मैले ब्याचलर्स गरेको थिएँ। म के गर्थेँ भन्दाखेरि एउटा केमिकल्स पाउँथ्यो, त्यो केमिकल्सले टमाटरलाई चाहिँ 6 महिना 7 महिनासम्म बिग्रिन दिँदैन थियो। अनि सिजनको समयमा चाहिँ म 200 किलो टमाटर लिएर घरमा आउँथेँ अनि टमाटरलाई ब्लेन्ड गरेर त्यो केमिकल्स हालिदिन्थेँ अनि अक्सिजनमा मजाले खान्थेँ। अनि त्यो कुरा देखेपछि सबैले हामीलाई पनि सिकाऊ त्यो केही छैन, एउटा केमिकल्स हाल्नु मात्र पऱ्यो। त त्यही कुराको ज्ञान हाम्रो भिलेजको मान्छेलाई छैन। दिस इज वान अफ द सिम्पल प्रोसेस होइन। अनि त्यसको जानकारी दिएर होममेड फुड प्रोडक्सन गराउने र त्यो होममेड फुड प्रोडक्सन एग्रिकल्चर प्रोडक्सनहरू जुन त्यो भिलेज सेन्टरमा आउँछ त्यसलाई मार्केटिङ गराउने र थुप्रै मार्केटिङ स्ट्राटेजिजहरू हुन्छ। मैले देखेको कम्युनिटी ग्रोसरी स्टोर खोल्ने, लोकल फुड मार्केट डेभलप गर्ने, मोबाइल फुड भेन्डर्सहरू इम्प्लोय गर्ने, कसरी हुन्छ मार्केटिङ, ताकि त्यो गाउँले उब्जाउ गरेको प्रत्येक खानेकुराहरू चाहिँ बिग्रोस् र उसको इकोनोमिक इम्प्रुभमेन्ट होस्। अनि त्यो अब प्रफिटले के गर्छ त भन्दाखेरि सबै प्रफिटले रुरल हेल्थ एन्ड एजुकेसनमा हामी त्यसलाई चाहिँ इन्भेस्ट गराउँ। जसरी जसको कारणले गर्दा हामी कम्युनिटी स्कुल्स डेभलप गर्न सकिन्छ त्यो भिलेज एरियामा। कम्युनिटी न्युट्रिसन इन्फेन्ट एन्ड म्याटर्निटी हेल्थको हामीले अलिकति त्यसमा पनि इम्प्रुभ गर्न सकिन्छ। र एउटा कुरा अहिले बराक ओबामाको फ्युचर इनिसिएटिभमा उनीहरूले टार्गेट गरेको छ, नेपालमा सम $50 मिलियन प्रोजेक्ट लगिरहेको छ। युएसएआइडी टप युनिभर्सिटी अहिले लन्च अफिसलाई पनि आइरहेको छ अफर, हार्वर्ड युनिभर्सिटीहरू मिलेर। उनीहरूको मेन एजेन्डा के छ भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो जस्तो देशमा सबभन्दा बेसी सफर भएको चाहिँ प्रेग्नेन्ट वुमेन्सहरू हो होइन। उनीहरूले प्रेग्नेन्ट अवस्थामा खान पाइरहेको हुँदैन, बच्चा जन्मदाखेरि कतिको बच्चा जन्मिने बेलामा घरमा कोही पनि हुँदैन, खेत जाँदा बच्चा जन्माउने स्थिति हुन्छ, गाईको गोठमा बच्चा जन्माउने स्थिति हुन्छ। बच्चा जन्मिसकेपछि बच्चालाई कस्तो किसिमको खानेकुरा चाहिन्छ त्यो पनि थाहा हुँदैन, थाहा भएर पनि के गर्नु खानेकुरै छैन। अनि त्यो पपुलेसनलाई टार्गेट गर्नुको लागि यिनीहरूले फ्युचर गरिरहेको छ। अनि त्यो कुरालाई सबै उनीहरूले मात्र गर्दैन, अमेरिकाले मात्र गर्दैन, के त्यो कुरा गर्न हामीसँग क्षमता छैन। हामी यो कृषि कम्युनिटीमा आउँदा एकजना मान्छेले $4-5 खर्च गर्छौँ अनि त्यस्तो केही रकमबाट हामीले एउटा प्रोजेक्ट त्यो किसिमको प्रोजेक्ट डेभलप गरौँ भन्ने मेरो कुरा हो। यसरी यो कन्सेप्टबाट लगेर फाइनल कन्सेप्ट हामी के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि एउटा भिलेजमा एउटा कम्युनिटी स्कुल डेभलप गरौँ, एउटा भिलेजमा एउटा फुड सेन्टर डेभलप गरेर त्यो फुड सेन्टरले नेपालको विकास तपाईँको घरको खाना सकिएको छ भने तपाईँले बनाउने हो होइन, तपाईँले छिमेकीले बनाइदिनु भने नेपाल हाम्रो घर हो। हाम्रो घर सकिएको छ भने हामीले जबसम्म ताकिँदैनौँ यो अमेरिकनहरूले जति पैसा दियो भने केही पनि हुँदैन, फरेनरहरूले जति पैसा दियो भने केही पनि हुँदैन। वी हेभ टु आवर कन्ट्री कसरी भन्दाखेरि डोनेसनले होइन, हामी यहाँ डोनेसनबाट मात्र भइसकेको छौँ, हरेक कुरामा डोनेसन दिइरहेको छौँ भने देश विकास गर्नको लागि डोनेसन होइन, वी हेभ टु इन्भेस्ट। र कसरी इन्भेस्ट गर्ने, कुन रूपले इन्भेस्ट गर्ने भन्दाखेरि वी आर नट टकिङ अबाउट $millions अफ इन्भेस्टमेन्ट फ्रम यु पिपल, कलेक्टिभ इन्भेस्टमेन्ट गर्नु। कलेक्टिभ इन्भेस्टमेन्ट भन्नाले एउटा नेपालीबाट $100 इन्भेस्ट गरौँ न, ताकि त्यो एउटा नेपालीले $100 इन्भेस्ट गर्दाखेरि हामी 200,000 नेपाली छौँ यहाँ, 200,000 नेपालीबाट नै नआयो भने एटलिस्ट हामीले 10,000 नेपालीलाई पनि त्यो इन्भेस्टमेन्टमा ल्याउन सक्यौँ भने यसको त बी अ बिग होइन सम अफ मनी। र एटलिस्ट हामीले टोटल नेपालको 75वटा जिल्लामा पनि गर्न नसक्यो भने एउटा जिल्लाबाट अथवा एउटा गाउँबाट यो प्रोजेक्टलाई स्टार्ट गरौँ भन्ने हो। अनि त्यसपछि त्यो पैसा हामी रिच फुड सेन्टरमा लगाउने, लगाइसकेपछि इन्भेस्टमेन्ट अफ डेभलपमेन्टले गएको पैसाले रिच फुड सेन्टरमा जहाँ लाग्छ, रिच फुड सेन्टरले गएको एग्रिकल्चर प्रोडक्टिभिटी र एग्रिकल्चर मार्केटिङबाट आएको प्रफिटको 50% प्रफिट इन्भेस्टरलाई जान्छ। जुन तपाईँले $100 इन्भेस्ट गर्नुभएको छ भने त्यो 50% प्रफिट तपाईँलाई जान्छ। अनि 50% प्रफिट बिकज दिस इज इन्टेन्डेड फर नेपाल्स रुरल डेभलपमेन्ट, स्पेसली रुरल इकोनोमी, हेल्थ एन्ड एजुकेसन फाउन्डेसन बनाएर कम्युनिटी स्कुल डेभलप गर्ने। त्यो 50% तपाईँहरूकै इन्भेस्टमेन्टबाट कम्युनिटी स्कुल कलेजहरू, न्युट्रिसनहरू, इन्फेन्ट र म्याटर्निटी पब्लिक हेल्थ पब्लिक हेल्थ अवेरनेस त्यो कुरामा गर्नु सक्यौँ भने तर हामीले नै गर्नु सक्यौँ भने हामीले केही गरेको चाहिँ हुन्छ र यति भन्दै इट्स नेभर टु लेट टु वर्क इन नेपाल। थ्याङ्क यू।
ट्रेड इकोनोमिक्स प्लानिङ कमिसनको भाइस चेयरहरू मान्छे उहाँले गएको कन्सेप्टमा हामी कमिटमेन्ट पुरै छैन, त्यो पुरा डाटा नभइकन हामी कमिटमेन्ट एउटा आउटलाइन भएको कमिटमेन्ट पुरै छैन। दिदीले जुन प्रेजेन्ट गर्नुभयो भिलेज डेभलपमेन्टमा भए जहाँ धेरै भिलेज हुन्छ त्यहाँ गर्नुपर्छ र जस्तो सेल्फ जस्टिस नभइकन अरूले गरेको कुरा गर्नै छैन र त्यहाँ दुई तिनवटा कुरा मात्रै के राख्छु भनेदेखि जुन नेपाल टुरिज्म भनेर हामी लागेको छौँ गजब राम्रो लाग्छ। तर के भनेदेखि जहाँ पनि मान्छे कन्ज्युमर ल्याउने कुरामा चाहिँ कन्ज्युमर सोध्नुपर्छ किन के मनपर्छ किन के हेर्नु भइरहेको छ कसो गरेर सोध्नुपर्छ। जस्तो मेरो तलमा भयो भने पेसेन्टको चार्ज हुन्छ, एभ्री पेसेन्टलाई चाहिँ तिम्रो सर्भिस कस्तो थियो के थियो कस्तो सोध्नुपर्छ। अनि मैले 4 वर्ष अगाडि नेपाल गएको थिएँ, त्यहाँ पनि टुरिज्मको कुरा भयो मैले उहाँहरूको भयो भने उहाँले भजन गर्नुभयो तर 2 वर्ष हरेक 2 वर्ष हामी आउँछौँ यहाँ। तपाईँले कहिले पनि हामीलाई सोध्नु भयो तपाईँ के हेर्न चाहनुहुन्छ, तपाईँ के गरेर तपाईँ आउनुहुन्छ, के गरेर तपाईँ साथीहरू ल्याउनुहुन्छ, बच्चा ल्याउनुहुन्छ सोध्नु भयो। खालि मका पहाड छ मका खोरा छ मका भेरमा पार्नु भएन त्यो म प्रोग्राममा देख्छु धेरै राम्रो नेपालले नेपाल मनपर्छ एउटा पनि त्यसैले चाहिँ तपाईँको के मनपर्छ के मनपर्छ। एक्जाम्पल दिउँ म गइरहेको थिएँ बाटोमा बस लग्यो बाटोमा गएँ भित्र गयो बस बस्दैछु अनि मैले भने सहिलो छ यसको काम त यहाँ चाहिँ जानुहोस् ट्रिपलले सर्टिफाइड गरेको रेस्टुरेन्टमा म बस्यो भने मलाई खाजा कन्डिसन दिएँ
लाई कति मराएर बोल्नु परेको छ हामी तर डक्टर सुविश्वास भनेको मैले विश्वास भन्नुभयो कि मलाई अहिले अमेरिकाले भक्ति दिँदाखेरि छ इडी वान यस्ता हुन्छ तर उहाँले मैले लेख्न मैले अमेरिका किनभने गरम विचारमा छु नेपालले गरम जुन सेवा खोजेर लिएर गएर सेवा चाहन्छु भन्ने त्यस्तो व्यक्तित्व हुन्छ डाक्टर सुविश्वास आजका एलिस्ट र अब हामीसँग अघि मैले मिडियाका साथीहरू परिचय गराएको एकजना मिडिया दुईजना साथीहरू छुट्याए हाम्रो नेपाल मिडिया क्याफेका हाम्रा सुशील नेवारजी यहाँ हुनुहुन्छ एकचोटि बोलिदिनु जानुभयो। अर्को खुसी कुरो नेपालले पनि आज हाम्रो यो कार्यक्रमको न्युज कभरेज गरिदिनुको लागि नेपालदेखि आउनुभएको छ कान्तिपुरका रिपोर्टरमा रहेर न्युज ब्युरोको इन्चार्ज सञ्जय मुखर्जी पत्रकार समिति बोल्नुहुन्छ। अब यसपछि हामी कार्यक्रमतिर प्रवेश गरौँ र मामूली राजनीतिलाई अब आफ्नो कार्यपत्रको टपिक चाहिँ डेभलपमेन्ट प्रोसेस फर पोस्ट कन्फ्लिक्ट केस अफ नेपाल टपिकमा आफ्नो कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुत गरेर म अनुरोध गर्छु। कार्यक्रममा नेपाल नेताहरूले आएर भन्नु लगाएको थियो नेपालको बारेमा यसको लिए के निर्णय गर्यो भने यहीँ व्यक्तित्व हुनुहुन्छ एमआर साहब
वास्तवमा म एकाएक नै यहाँ नमान मैं तेरा मेहमान जस्तो किसिमको स्थिति नै भनौँ तर मलाई थाहा थियो कि यहाँ कन्भेन्सन हुँदैछ भन्ने कुरा र अब एउटा आफ्नो नेपाल र नेपालीको एउटा यत्रो सौहार्द भेलामा कमसेकम म एउटा नेपालदेखि आइसकेपछि 2 शब्द एउटा ईश्वरीय कृपा स्थित या अमेरिका लगायत क्यानाडा आदि बाहिर विदेशमा सम्पूर्ण नेपाली दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनीहरूलाई आशीर्वाद दिउँ भन्ने मात्र मेरो हेतु हो। अन्य अब कुनै पनि यस किसिमको मैले आफूलाई प्रस्तुत गर्नुपर्ने कुनै विषय भएन र जे होस् म यहाँ आएँ र आइसकेपछि मलाई केही क्षण मात्रै भए पनि यसमा उपस्थित रहेर 2 शब्द आफ्नो अभिव्यक्त गर्ने मौका दिएकोमा यो 29वां अमेरिका नेपाल एसोसिएसन कन्भेन्सन र सम्पूर्ण आयोजकप्रति म आभार व्यक्त गर्दै म धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु र साथै आशीर्वाद पनि। र यही आशीर्वादमा 2टा कुरा अत्यन्त मलाई पढिरहेको एउटा नेपाली भएको नाताले त्यो के भन्दा म सन् 3 मा पहिलोपटक अमेरिका आएँ र मेरो पहिलो विदेश यात्रा थियो। त्यसपछि यो मेरो 19वां विदेश यात्रा हो। इङ्ल्यान्ड, क्यानाडा र अमेरिका गरेर मेरो अमेरिकाको 10वां यात्रा हो। र मैले एउटै कुराको चाह राखेको के भने हामी सम्पूर्ण नेपालीहरू जे जस्तो आफ्नो दुःख सुखले आज हामी अमेरिकामा हौँ या अन्य अरू कुनै विदेशमा हौँ। अहिले पनि भर्खरै मैले यहाँ एउटा नेपालकै विकासको लागि, नेपालकै एउटा कल्याणको लागि, हितको लागि सोचेको पनि योजनाको बारेमा 2-4 शब्द यहाँ मैले सुन्ने मौका पाएँ। हामी सबैलाई आफ्नो मातृभूमिको चासो छ, आफ्नो नेपालका दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनीको चासो छ। त्यस्तै हामी पनि आफ्नो दुःख र सुखले यहाँ अवस्थित छौँ। कुनै धेरै समयदेखि छौँ, कुनै भर्खरै आएका छौँ र सबैको आफ्नै एउटा दिनचर्या, आफ्नै दैनन्दिन जीवन छ। र यसको साथसाथै सबभन्दा ठुलो कुरा हाम्रो युनिटी, एकता। हामी नेपालको जुनसुकै भूभागमा रहेर पनि शिर झुकाएर, शिर ठाडो गरेर हाम्रो एउटा मौलिकता, आफ्नो संस्कार, संस्कृति र परिचयलाई हामीले कसरी विकास गर्न सक्छौँ भन्ने कुरामा मैले सन् 3 देखि नै मैले भाग लिएका एटलान्टा, न्यू जर्सी, शिकागो आदिका कार्यक्रमहरूमा पनि मैले अभिव्यक्त गर्दै आएँ र आज पनि म त्यही 2 शब्द यहाँ राख्ने चाहले मात्र म यहाँ बसेको हुँ। र जसरी हो त्यो सम्पन्न हुँदैछ र यहाँहरू सबैको एउटा स्वस्थता, समृद्धि र आफू जुन आकाङ्क्षा लिएर विदेश हामी बसेका हौँ त्यो आकाङ्क्षा आफू, आफ्नो जीवन र समग्र राष्ट्रको लागि हामी केही दिन सक्ने बनौँ र हामी जहाँ गए पनि नेपाली झुकेर होइन, नेपाली शिर ठाडो गरेर आफ्नो एउटा चरित्र र आफ्नो एउटा आचरणलाई परिमार्जित गरेर आफूसित भएको एउटा योग्यता र क्षमतालाई विकसित गरेर आफ्नो जीवनको निर्वाह सँगसँगै राष्ट्रको लागि पनि केही योगदान दिने जुन हाम्रो एउटा लक्ष्य हो त्यो लक्ष्य पुरा गर्नमा सबैलाई भगवान पशुपतिनाथ, गुरु गोरखनाथ र माता विन्ध्यवासिनीको अविरत कृपा र आशीर्वाद लागिरहोस् भन्ने चाहना अभिव्यक्त गर्न मैले अहिले 2 मिनटको समय जुन यहाँहरूको मैले लिएँ त्यसको लागि म क्षमा चाहन्छु। किनकि म एकाएक बसेर मैले एउटा आफ्नो यहाँको समयलाई मैले बसिदिएँ र भविष्यमा मैले यदि यस्तो मौका पाए खण्डमा हाम्रो यस किसिमको कार्यक्रममा हाम्रो धर्म, संस्कृति, संस्कार र त्यसको औचित्य के हो, त्यसमा साइन्टिफिक के कुरा छ, किन हामीले ती कुराहरूलाई मान्ने हो, ती कुराहरूको पछि हामी किन लाग्ने हो भन्ने कुरालाई पनि सिक्ने, सिकाउने खालको यदि व्यवस्था यस किसिमको कन्भेन्सनले राखिदिएको खण्डमा म जस्तै त्यस्ता सन्त महात्माहरू, विद्वानहरू आएर उनीहरूले आफूले तपस्याबाट अर्जित गरेको, उनीहरूले आफ्नो ज्ञानबाट अर्जित गरेको कुरालाई हाम्रो आउने भविष्यका सन्ततिहरूलाई पनि बाँड्ने, त्यसलाई चाहिँ ट्रान्सफर गर्ने, त्यसलाई रूपान्तरित गर्ने काममा पनि केही त्यसको उपायता हुन सक्थ्यो होला र म मान्छु त्यो अत्यन्तै जरुरी लाग्छ मलाई। यदि त्यसो गरिएन भने भोलिको भविष्यमा हाम्रा सन्ततिहरूले हाम्रो नेपाल कहाँ हो, हामी नेपाली कसरी हो, हाम्रो संस्कार के हो र संस्कृति हो भन्ने कुरा बिर्सदै जान्ने स्थिति हुँदाखेरि यो प्रत्येक नेपालीले आफ्नो मौलिकता, नेपालीको मौलिकता, आफ्नो परिचय बनाउनलाई त्यसप्रति पनि ध्यान जाओस् भन्ने म यहाँ अनुरोध राख्दै म आफ्नो हृदयदेखि तपाईँहरूले यस कन्भेन्सनको सफलता र सम्पूर्ण हाम्रो नेपाल र नेपालीको जुन प्रवास छ त्यसमा सुख, समृद्धि, स्वास्थ्यको कामना सहित भविष्यमा आउने यस्ता कार्यक्रमले नेपाल र नेपालीको प्रति एउटा ठुलो आयाम थपोस् र आज नेपालको जुन परिस्थिति छ, जुन परिवेश छ त्यसमा हामी जहाँ रहेर पनि नेपाल शीघ्र शान्ति होस् र नेपाल र हामी नेपालीहरू जहाँ रहेको तापनि हामी फुटेर होइन, हामी जुनसुकै जातपात, वर्ण, लिङ्ग, जुनसुकै धर्म भए तापनि हामी एउटै नेपाल आमाको सन्तति, एउटै परिवार मानेर कसरी चल्न सकिन्छ भन्ने अभ्यास गर्ने प्रत्येक नेपालीले कोसिस गरौँ। त्यही सन्देश
शङ्कर प्रसाद शर्मा dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me congratulate Ambassador Dr. Sharma for being able to accomplish two significantly important but extremely difficult things within the first year of his tenure as the Ambassador of Nepal to US. Number one, the signing of the US-Nepal Free Trade and Investment Framework Agreement with the United States, and number two, creating a congressional caucus for Nepal in the capital. Ambassador Dr. Shankar Prasad Sharma, a statistician turned economist, has a PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii. A fellow of East-West Central Hawaii, Ambassador Dr. Sharma has received the Distinguished Alumni Award from the Center for his exceptional accomplishment in his role as the economic planner, development practitioner, and his contributions to East-West relations and understanding. He was one of the distinguished people. He was one of the 5 distinguished people awarded in the year 2010, including Nobel laureate Dr. Rajendra Pachauri and Dr. Anne Dunham Sweeter, who is the mother of President Obama. Dr. Sharma is regarded as one of the 2 key architects of Nepal's initiatives in economic liberalization and reform, Dr. Praveen Mani Dixit being the other. A number of reform initiatives were carried out under his leadership as the senior economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance and a member as well as the Vice President of National Planning Commission. He initiated and introduced the Poverty Reduction Strategy Paper Nepal and Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. Both these initiatives sought to bring paradigm shift in development planning and financing in Nepal, although unfortunately Nepal could not witness the full impact of this reform initiative because of political instability. Moreover, the reform initiatives in corporate governance and financial sectors that were implemented under his watch are partly credited for the phenomenal growth of financial sector in Nepal. As a chief development planner, he was in charge of leading economic development during the peak years of Maoist insurgency and was well aware of their way of thinking. Dr. Sharma was closely observing and analyzing the trends in economic development as well as helping parties develop a common vision for development even after leaving the office of Vice President at NPC. Just before coming to US as Nepal's ambassador, Dr. Sharma worked as a consultant to the Constitution Committee on Distribution of Natural Resources, Economic Rights and Public Revenue. Dr. Sharma accomplished the Herculean task of winning the trust of all political parties and was able to bring about a consensus on various pressing issues in the area of sharing of natural resources. A strong promoter of public-private partnership in Nepal, he has closely worked with Nepalese umbrella organizations of industry and commerce. His experience working with internal stakeholders in different forums like these helped him gain a vast knowledge of development perspective of internal stakeholders in the country. Similarly, Dr. Sharma has had extensive dealing with senior level officials of donor governments, development agencies, non-profit organizations, and the corporate sector regarding policy dialogue, foreign aid, peace building, and overall development agenda. Due to such exposure, he is fully aware of the kind of opportunities that external development partners are looking for in order to help Nepal achieve its development goals. Therefore, as his credentials speak, Ambassador Dr. Sharma is the authority on the issue that he is going to discuss with us today, development prospects of post-conflict countries, a case of Nepal. Thank you.
सबभन्दा पहिले जब भर्जिनियामा आउनुभयो आइसकेपछि एउटा सानो भेटघाट जस्तोको प्रोग्राम थियो त्यो प्रोग्राममा उहाँले जब एउटा थिम राख्नुभयो त्यो थिमप्रति म सबभन्दा पहिले आकर्षित भएर मेरो परिचय भयो। कनेक्टिकट युनिभर्सिटीबाट पिएचडी गर्नुभयो अनि त्यसपछि हार्वर्ड युनिभर्सिटीबाट पोस्ट डक्टरेट गर्नुभयो बायोमेडिकल साइन्समा। उहाँले चाहिँ कनेक्टिकट युनिभर्सिटीबाट न्युट्रिसनल साइन्समा उहाँले डक्टरेट गर्नुभएको हो। अनि त्यसपछि डाक्टर सुदीप श्रेष्ठलाई हार्वर्ड युनिभर्सिटीले त्यहाँ जागिर अफर गर्यो, तर उहाँले चाहिँ त्यो जागिर चाहिँ लिनु भएन। र हार्वर्ड युनिभर्सिटीमा जब जागिर अफर गरिन्छ त कसैले पनि छोड्दैन, यो तपाईँहरू सबैलाई थाहा छ। त्यसपछि उहाँ यहाँ आउनुभयो र जोन हपकिन्स युनिभर्सिटीमा पोस्ट डक्टरेटको लागि न्युट्रिसन नेपाल सम्बन्धी न्युट्रिसन प्रोजेक्टमा चाहिँ उहाँले अहिले रिसर्च चाहिँ गरिरहनु भएको छ। पोस्ट डक्टरेट पनि त्यही गरिरहनुभयो र अहिले त्यही कार्यरत हुनुहुन्छ। यसभन्दा अगाडि मैले एउटा के सानो कुरा भन्न चाहन्छु भनेदेखि जब उहाँले हार्वर्ड युनिभर्सिटीबाट जब अफर गरेर छोडेर यहाँ आउनुभयो अनि मलाई चाहिँ एउटा क्युरियोसिटी के लाग्यो भने किन छोड्नुभयो, मैले छोड्नु किन डेफिनेटली। तर उहाँलाई चाहिँ मैले सोधेँ किन छोड्नुभयो भन्दाखेरि उहाँको एउटै थिम के थियो भने मान्छेले सबैले डक्टर गरेर आउँछ र मैले पनि डक्टर गरेको छु, तर म चाहिँ नेपालप्रति केही गर्न चाहन्छु, नेपालमा केही गर्न चाहन्छु। र हामी धेरै समयको डिस्कसनपछि हामी हाम्रो घरमा पनि सबै बस्यौँ धेरै समय डिस्कसनको लागि। त्यहाँ बस्दाखेरि हाम्रो डाक्टर साहबले, डाक्टर सुदीप श्रेष्ठले एउटै कुरा के गर्नुभयो भने यहाँ मैले जोन्स हपकिन्स युनिभर्सिटीमा जे गर्दैछु नेपालको लागि गरिरहेछु र अब हामीले गर्ने प्रोजेक्टहरू पनि सबै नेपालकै लागि हुनुपर्छ र त्यसै सम्बन्धमा हामीले गरौँ भनेर 2-3वटा प्रोजेक्टहरू एउटा फर्मुलेसनको चाहिँ उसमा चाहिँ आएको छ अहिले। र अब योभन्दा बढी मैले चाहिँ टाइम चाहिँ गर्नु उहाँको जुन भित्रप्रतिको मनको इच्छा नेपालप्रति गर्ने चाहिँ उहाँको जुन इच्छा छ म त्यसैलाई अत्यन्त सम्मान गर्दै म चाहिँ डाक्टर सुदीप श्रेष्ठज्यू प्रति आभार व्यक्त गर्दै उहाँको छौँमै परिचय डाक्टर सुदीप श्रेष्ठ हजुर उहाँ चाहिँ को यति सानो परिचय चाहिँ छुट्याएर मैले बिदा चाहन्छु।